All right, real quickly here, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Again, we're in the cold day unit that we're getting ready to harvest here. This is third growth that we're looking at. Douglas fir, that's a patch in here that's Douglas fir. And I can tell you that it was planted. I don't know why they planted Douglas fir here, because the elevation isn't quite right, and you can see that these Douglas fir trees are not doing so hot. They've got a lot of damage from probably from ice and other things like that, snow and then ice and wind, and that combination, because we are at about 3,500 feet right now, and so that's a bit on the upper edge of the Douglas fir range, and that's why you're looking at these Douglas fir. There's a lot of Douglas fir snags. There's a lot of Douglas fir with broken tops that have ramicorn limbs coming off of the side, which happens when the top breaks and you have competition for leaders. And yeah, so, you know, when we're looking at the true fir and even the hemlock in here, which tend to do better at higher elevations, especially the true fir, they're way better equipped and are looking a lot better than this Douglas fir in here, because they're way better equipped to take snow load and deal with snow. So that's why when we're looking at the hemlock here and the true firs, those are the ones that still have their tops to them and haven't broken off. Another thing I want to point out too is just the lack of understory vegetation. We do have a little bit of devil's club right here, some woodland fern. There's a elderberry popping up there. We've got some false lily of the valley or western lily of the valley, some sword fern, but they're really small, minuscule plants. And in fact, the plants here are telling me something. I came from this area back here where the forest isn't opened up like this, for one, because of the dead Douglas fir. And you see this stark contrast here. Boom, there's like no understory vegetation at all in here. Hardly any at all. You can see again these small little stems in here that were cut during the pre-commercial thinning, probably 30 years ago or so. And then, you know, looking up here, no understory, no understory, no understory. Dense canopy cover, very straight, however short, but straight. True fir and western hemlock in here. This one's kind of sweepy, this hemlock, but for the most part, pretty decent trees. And then I cross over this area here that has some understory vegetation in it. So that tells me a couple things. One thing is that we've opened up in here, and so we're letting more sunlight down into this area. But then also, this area has a lot more moisture in it. And that could be for a number of reasons, but particularly one of the main reasons is that there's probably some underground water movement through here, and water is wicking up through the soil, and the roots are getting going down deeper into the soil to get that water. And you have less competition also, which is another major point, because these Douglas fir have died, and so they're not sucking up as much moisture in this area. But if you look at this area here, it's almost like, if you could imagine it, we're an underground stream here flowing down here. We have all this lily of the valley here. There's some bear damage. But then, you know, and I look up above there, but then here I am at, again, another transition at a cutoff where, boom, there's no more, hardly any understory vegetation at all, even though we're still in this Douglas fir forest that The bears love the Douglas fir. You can see along the base here, there's 3 trees with bear damage, but then broken top, ramacorn, you know, these trees are not going to bring that much money at the mill because they have so much defect in them. And we're going to plant true fir here instead because we've noticed that Douglas fir is not doing well here, even though it's going to bring less money at the mill because Douglas fir and hemlock will bring more money. Now, we will get quite a bit of natural regeneration of Douglas fir here and hemlock especially. So we will have some, but we're going to plant true fir. And then the other thing we're going to do here is not use vegetation control because there's no need. There's no understory vegetation to fight off. And so we're not as concerned of the competition to these crop trees here. So those are 2 things that we think about when we're out here assessing this area. And again, I can see already ahead of me here about 50 feet. Look, we get more understory vegetation. I can imagine there might be some kind of, you know, little underground creek or definitely some kind of water, you know, subsurface water happening here. And just like before when we were looking at that bedrock hollow area, you know, imagining there might be vegetation like this above it that's kind of tracing or tracking, you know, that underground flow until, you know, as long as it's not too deep, but, you know, until it hits a slope break or a bank like that and then hits that compacted glacial till and has nowhere else to go, and then boom, it pops out as a seep and then starts to make a stream. So you got to use your imagination a lot in this business. You also have to observe and be very observant, and you can start to notice trends like these that I was just showing you, and then also be able to assess, you know, whether or not this is the best crop tree for this area, which I'm going to say no. Planting Douglas fir here, we should plant true fir. Okay, just a quick stop here. I want to point out how basically building trails, just like building logging roads, your management of water is very key. You can see here this trail is called Return Policy. It's a climbing trail to get up to some of the Rattlesnake Ridge downhill trails. And so it has to remain at a certain grade. They don't want to go really over 16%, which is very similar to our logging roads. It's a nice kind of even slope that's pretty easy to walk and pretty easy to ride. And so you can see here, it's got a little bit of a grade going up there, and then we're in this low spot because, let me back up here, the grade slopes up there and then goes back down into another little dip. But what they've done here is they put in a few cutouts so that the water will drain here, because it's going to be coming down the trail here almost like a stream. It's almost like we've created a stream here in a way. And you can see here evidence of water puddling here. And then if you can imagine too, we're at 3,500 feet. And so this area is going to get a lot of snow melt and snowpack as well. And it's going to sit here, you know, in this area, and you're going to want it to slough off, you know, to run off, basically use it into these cutouts here that they've put in to help with drainage. You can see this one has gotten a lot of action just by the different kind of the shapes of the rill there. And I'll also point out while we're here, kind of a shallow cut, but if If you notice, there's a lot of fine gravel type size material in here, and a few larger stones, but it's all angular rock again because we're up at like 3,500 feet, just above or right at the very tip top of where the glaciers would have been. And this stuff does make for nice bike trail kind of subgrade here is what we're looking at. And so since this material is so rocky in here, they didn't really have to truck in a lot of rock from elsewhere, because a lot of this rock is already available here as native material. And here's another good cut here. You know, we've got our O horizon, and then a thin A, and then into the lots of redox in that B1 horizon there, so red because of the amount of moisture you know, that's going on here. So that's pretty much it for my little talk about drainage for trails, which is very similar to drainage for roads. And then also just looking at, you know, as I'm walking along this trail, just observing the you know, the size of the rock and also the angle of the rock, and that it's all angular. And then knowing my elevation tells me there's probably not a lot of glacial influences here. Then I get rocks like this, and you see this is pumice here, or it's volcanic. And so this could have blown from Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, you know, one of those events. I wouldn't be surprised if there's ash layer in this soil as well, but there's been a lot of fire up here too. You can see, you know, in here there's charcoal and charcoal there. But imagine if we dug into the boundary of our O and A horizon, we might find some volcanic ash. And this is all fungi in here, all this white. I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's all fungi, hyphae. You can see how it's around the roots. So no ash in this spot, but again, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, lots of angular rock.